So I picked up this thing from Qwiizlab. It's called an aluminum magnetic stand for iPad. This is not a sponsored video, but it's certainly one where I was interested to see just what this might do for the setup and make it usable. So I got this. I've picked it up and then put it together. This is what it looks like. It has a magnetic backing and it has a nice like a rubber thing here to make it not scratch the iPad. The iPad snaps on pretty nicely. Every once in a while it does drift, but for the most part, the magnet is nice enough and holds it perfectly in place. Only when I'm like, plugging something into the edge of it, or every once in a while if I'm adjusting the volume knob. I wouldn't shake this around or hold it upside down, but sitting in this position, it works really well. The gray cable came with this and it hooks up the stand to the iPad. The white, of course, is my power. And then I was plugging in these two different accessories. The first is this Steinberg interface. It's just a 2-channel interface, but I've done this as well with my SSL 12, and that works. It works really well because the hub that's connected to the iPad is powered, and so I haven't had any issues with enough power going to it. The keyboard I really enjoyed for this. I'm going to unpack it here in a second. It also worked really well. I haven't noticed any major latency issues with either of these devices. The Steinberg is designed to work in low latency situations. It has one of those mix knobs that lets you hear the input and the feedback from your workstation. So it's designed for this type of situation really nicely. So you have essentially zero latency coming off of analog sources. I'm sure there's some very small amount of, just the electrical amount of time, but it's very, very, very easy to use in that way. With the keyboard, the MIDI is just the normal amounts of latency time based on the buffer you set in there. Both of those have worked really well. Because the Qi MPK Mini really functions best with the software that comes from Qi to get it set up, that doesn't work on the iPad, so we're going to miss some of the functionality there. But after I got it all connected, I went to make sure that things are actually working inside. Here's a nice view of those connections on the side. Well, let's make sure these devices are working. We have two different places in our settings. The audio one is first. It looks like you just need to make sure it's selected. And then we're going to turn off the interface on the audio that has MIDI, but use the MPK Mini 2. Okay, so all of those devices are working now. Let's put on the headphones. So everything worked. Everything was functional with minimal effort. Things were recognized without having to do drivers. Both all of these things that I'm using are class compliant, which means they meet the spec to just work without drivers installed. And then I went in and just worked on making a song, seeing that workflow again, having these tools though, having good monitoring with good headphones and a nice audio interface, which do you really need an audio interface? Only if you're going to be recording with microphones. I could have used the headphone jack, although I'm assuming there'd be some other latency things that I would have to test out. But the keyboard is so nice to have, even though it's small and compact, and you could use any size MIDI keyboard, but this one means that it's portable and you can stick it in your backpack with the other pieces of this and just keep working along anywhere you're going. So for the rest of this, I'm going to be making this short little song just to experiment with it. You don't have to stick around for that, but if you want to see the iPad version in an actual, songwriting situation, then this may be interesting for you. But before I actually go and just let you hear all of that, I did want to give my overall review of this thing, because I'm always interested in being more portable and having all of the tools I want in a small package. If I could do all of my stuff on a phone screen, I probably would. It's not ideal, and certainly there are some limitations to the iPad version of Logic, but with this type of stand, is the closest as I've gotten to using it like I would a laptop, right? Isn't that kind of the thing? So what are the benefits to this over a laptop? A laptop, sure, is going to have more power and have all of the features of Logic. But what would be nice about the iPad version? So in this particular scenario with this device, you have everything plugged into it, your audio interface, your MIDI keyboard, the wireless mouse and keyboard. You have all of that stuff there, but at any point, there's one connection to the iPad. I can just unplug it. It would reset the audio drivers because you'd be taking away the interface. And then I could walk over to, say, the sofa and just work on the iPad with the pencil and keep making progress. So we don't necessarily have to, with a laptop, you could do a similar thing, but you're going to have more things connected for sure. This has one connection, unplug it, everything else just stays there. Okay, you could kind of do that with a docking setup of a laptop. What you can't do with a laptop is have all the touch interface portions of this. And so that means I could be working on my equalization using my fingers on the EQ curve in a multi-touch experience. You can't do that with the desktop version of Logic very easily. You could do that with the Logic Pro Control app, but then you don't have the audio with you as well. Now, I certainly complain about many of the plugins and how the interface works on the Logic Pro for iPad. However, some of the things make a lot of sense. Like Sample Alchemy is great with the iPad version, better than with the desktop version, because you can really get in there with your fingers and touch all the node points and move the sound around. I think that's terrific. I do like being able to use my fingers directly on the plugins on the screen instead of always having to rely on a mouse. So that's another thing that's a benefit to using the iPad version, which I like, being able to use it either here at the setup or as I move around. Really easy to take this, throw it back in its other case that I have, which is also magnetic. It takes 1 second to put the case back on, put it in my backpack, and I run out the door. I think that alone, just that ease of transitioning from one place to another. Plus, you can take this anywhere you are and record ideas with the onboard microphone. Again, you could do that with the laptop, but this is easier in many ways. It stays out of the way a little bit more. It's not as big of a device as a laptop. It doesn't have the keyboard element there. And so I think that there's some parts of this which are nice in that way. Is it ever going to replace the full version of Logic? Of course it's going to at some point, right? There's no way that it's not going to eventually replace or be equal to the desktop of Logic. I don't see a future where that's not the case, because iPad is going to keep on getting more powerful. And there's some things that they're going to probably leave off that version, and some things that will eventually leave the desktop version. Who knows for sure, but it's unlikely that they're going to remain separate with separate features forever. It's just not possible. Anyway, those are my thoughts on this. I don't necessarily recommend this specific magnetic stand for the iPad. I do think it's great. but I haven't done thorough research with a bunch of other brands or anything. I just know that this one has worked really well. But the concept of this, if you want to do music production on an iPad, something like this stand is so amazing. And I think it's the way to go for this. You can really do this. Okay, I'm going to just let the rest of this songwriting session play out. If you're interested in sticking around and watching it, that's great. The one thing that I will say is that just because an iPad can have all the tools, it means nothing for the quality of your music. And sometimes when you're just spitballing song ideas, you're not guaranteed to have better results just because you're doing it on an iPad with a stand, if that makes sense. So take it for what it is. Hopefully there's some cool techniques in here that you might be interested in, and I'm just going to let it go from there.